Welcome back to BreakRoom. I'm Britt Ramsey. I'm so excited to be here today with Taylor Lechner. She is a phenomenal leader in the space of health and wellness for women, and we're going to get more into those details and how that impacts your life and career. But first, I want to introduce her. She has a phenomenal background. She has a master's in food and nutrition. She's an RD. She's an LD. She is a birth control and hormone dietitian, founder of Nourish by Taylor. She specializes especially for women to help them have a smooth transition off of birth control and how to heal their symptoms naturally. Taylor, welcome to BreakRoom. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I love talking to other businesswomen and connecting with women who are in the online entrepreneur space.
I first want to get started with, how did you get to where you're at today, right? I want to hear a little bit behind the scenes of your journey, where you started, and then how you got to your business now.
Yeah. So my journey starts all the way back when I was 18. So essentially what happened is I lost my period at 18 years old, and my mom and I went to the doctor, and they simply handed me a prescription for birth control. No questions were asked, no deeper digging of like, well, why is she missing her period? They were just like, it's normal, like you're really healthy, you're active. And they basically told me, just stay on this till you want to get pregnant. You're going away to college anyways, like might as well stay on birth control. So we asked, are there any side effects or things we should be concerned about? And they're like, nope, it's all good, like super safe to be on. So started taking the pill, and a couple weeks later, I started having what I thought was a period. And I was like, great, problem solved. So what was really going on was I was actually meticulously counting calories. I was exercising every single day, sometimes for hours every single day. I was obsessed with being the quote unquote healthiest I could be. So I was actually struggling with an undiagnosed eating disorder, which is why I lost my period. So thankfully, I was able to heal my relationship with food and with exercise and my body. And that's what inspired me to become a registered dietitian. And I was working in the space of eating disorders for several years, 8 years, for a really long time after I graduated. And I thought that's where I was going to stay. But that all changed one day. I was sitting in my car. I was driving across town to pick up takeout food. And I put this random podcast on that I'd never listened to before. And the women on the podcast were talking all about how you're not actually having a period on birth control. And just for people who this might be news to you as well, the reason you're not having a true period on birth control is you're not actually ovulating, because the way birth control works shuts down your body's natural ability to make its own hormones. So instead of having natural ebbs and flows in your hormones throughout the month, they're flatlined like a male essentially. And you're not ovulating, which is what creates a true period. So you have an artificial bleed, but it's not an actual healthy period. Fun fact, like the reason that you have that is because when birth control first came out many years ago, women were so disturbed with not having a period every single month that manufacturers, like the pharmaceutical companies, actually created those sugar pills to induce that artificial bleed, because it was freaking women out that they weren't having a period. And then that just somehow like manifested into like you're having a period. So yeah, that was news to me. I was 27 years old. I had a master's degree in nutrition, very health conscious, very aware. And I was like, wow, I have no clue what's happening in my own body. Yeah. And then they went on to continue talking about all the negative side effects of being on birth control. And so I felt really duped and really like blindsided by all that information. And I started just connecting the dots of like my anxiety had been building over the years. My digestion was getting worse. I was breaking out even on birth control, even though that was supposed to like help my breakouts. I'm doing a lot of air quotes for those of you who are on YouTube. You see me, but doing a lot of air quotes here. And so I did what I do, and I dove into the research, and I uncovered and learned all about what I call the dark side of birth control, things that I'd never been taught, things that I wish I would have known. And I also want to make it like very clear, I'm not anti-birth control, but I am anti non-informed consent. That's my big thing. I made the personal decision to stop birth control after learning all of that. And I went to my doctor. She was like, yeah, just stop and see what happens. So that's what I did. And for the next 4 years, I dealt with like hormonal hell, essentially, is what I call it. My breakouts were super bad. They were so embarrassing. I would like cry in front of the mirror. I would spend so much money trying to fix, like with all the fancy skincare and potions and all the stuff. My anxiety was sky high. My digestion was even worse. And every time I went to my doctor or my dermatologist, they were just like, this is normal. Your labs look good. This is part of being a woman. This might just be how you are, or you just have to go back on birth control. And I distinctly remember I was at my dermatologist, one of the many times, and after a particularly bad acne flare. And I was in my 30s at this point. I'm 34 now. I mean, this was just a couple of years ago. And I was in my 30s dealing with acne like a teenager, like worse than when I was a teenager. And my dermatologist basically said, like, your only other options are to go back on birth control or Accutane. And I didn't like either of those options. And so I went to my car and I started crying. And I was like, I feel so stuck. I feel so helpless. I feel like my body's trying to tell me something, but I don't know what it's trying to tell me. So I had my little moment, and then I just had this resolve of like, okay, if no one's going to figure this out for me, I'm going to figure it out my own. So I ended up pursuing advanced functional nutrition training, and it was specifically geared towards women. My mentor was someone who specializes in chronic skin conditions and hormones and healing them from the inside out. And I learned all about these lab tests that I'd never heard about before, even as a dietitian, all these root causes. And I basically became my own client, and I was able to heal my hormones, heal my anxiety, heal my skin after 4 years of dealing with these symptoms, with all this information that I learned. And my eyes were opened, like once you realize this, you start to realize how many other women are suffering with the exact same thing of just being told like, go on birth control, or, just surface level things where it's like, we're not getting to the deeper cause of like why you're feeling bad. And so that's what inspired me to switch gears. I was a manager working with eating disorders. Like, I had a really well-established career, but I just felt pulled in this other direction of like, there's no one out here helping women with that. If I would have had this information prior to stopping birth control, I wouldn't have had to deal with that. And so I wanted to help other women not have to experience that. And so that's what inspired me to open my own business. And I've been in practice for about 2.5 years at this point, and I love it. So that's my story.
Well, I have so many questions building up on a personal note, but I also want to start just high level with the transition in general. When we make transitions in our career, it's a risk, it's overwhelming. Sometimes people feel stuck because they want to transition into a niched position, but they get stuck because they feel this is what I went to school for. Let me just try to make it work. So talk a little bit about that transition to get you from what you were focused on, eating disorders, to really niche down into this space that you weren't typically looking to take that path. What helped you transition and just kind of commit to that change?
Yeah. I mean, I would say it was like a slow and steady. It took me about a year to really commit to specifically helping women safely, like to commit to being the dietitian that helps women transition off birth control, because it is so niche and it is so specific. But the whole time I was like, this is my dream client. Like, this is who I would love to support, or the woman who's who's come off and is like dealing with post-birth control syndrome like I was. So it kind of took me some trial and error of like, when I did the functional nutrition training, it came with not only the clinical training, but it also came with business coach experience or support. And so my business coach and I were just like constantly talking about things. And I started really broad. I was like, now that I know this, I can take people with digestive issues. I can take people with, who are menopausal. I can take people who have all these different conditions. I can really help a lot of people. And I was attracting clients because my marketing was really broad. I was attracting clients that weren't really people who I loved working with. They were less committed. They were a little bit more flaky. They weren't as invested in their health. And so, I think that really is what pushed me to be like, my business coach was like, who do you want to work with, like in a dream world? And I was like, I would love to support women with having a proactive transition off of birth control and healing their hormones naturally. I would love that. And there's no one out there talking about it. So I feel like there's this need. And so I think that's kind of like what inspired me to like really niche down. And I also had to I will say, I think this is important. The first year of my business, did not take any vacations. I was like grind mode. I don't think that's right, but like, that's just like the season I was in. And I took my first vacation in December, and I came back and I did not work because I didn't have internet. And it was so good for me. But I came back with this new resolve and this clarity of like, okay, this is the woman I want to help.
I love that. And I think what you said just again really stands out is like, sometimes you have to kind of tighten your community to even have more impact than trying to impact everyone. And then you're not settling. Yeah, it's like I work with a lot of women marketers, and a lot of times I remind them, if you are trying to apply for jobs or make transitions out there, but you are trying to apply to every marketing role and every digital role you're not hitting, you're not really connecting with that client. So I think that's something to say, like you really became much more purposeful, and I love that. I think it's just like a good takeaway. So aside from careers, what I want women in my community to really kind of walk away from this is like, what do I do next, right? So you obviously know so much about this space. Of course, they can come to people like you. But if a woman is just sitting with this information right now, what are a few suggestions that you have for like steps forward in maybe what they should do or what they should look for in order to get more in touch with their hormonal health, and kind of check in with themselves?
Yeah. I think the first thing is just checking in with how you feel, because I think it's been so normalized that it's normal to have a crappy period. It's normal to feel tired. I think a lot of that gets put on like, oh, well, that's because you're stressed. But it's
Yeah.
like, yes, that's a piece of the puzzle, but you shouldn't feel horrible all the time. And so I think just
Mhm.
really checking in and like seeing, do I feel like my best self? And if not, that's when we want to dig deeper and figure out, well, what imbalances are going off in your body that are causing you to feel like that. That's not normal. And so that's a big mission I'm on, is just like a lot of women don't realize how horrible they feel until they start working with me and we start repairing from the inside out. And they're like, wow, like I didn't realize a few months ago like how bad I felt. And now I feel like a
Yeah.
totally different person mentally, physically, emotionally.
Normalization of stress, and that that feeling is normal. I've been told, because I have two little ones under 3 now, that I'm in it.
Yeah.
You're in it. You're in a time you're just going to feel exhausted. You're just going to feel stressed. And honestly, sitting here with you today is the first time I've had an aha moment of like, but what if I don't have to feel that way? What if I don't have to feel exhausted and feel burned out? It's such a valid point. Um, then how do we know then we can treat that maybe with hormones? Is there a specific lab work, or what should we be looking at as women, that if we're really feeling that exhaustion, and how do we, kind of
How do you get
unravel that
answers?
a little more?
Yeah. Yeah. So I will actually share, I very rarely run hormone testing on women.
Really? Oh my gosh,
And
tell me more. Yeah.
okay. And that's because hormones are just a symptom. They're not the root cause. And so I always talk about hormones are like the tip of the iceberg. Like that's what you
Okay.
see. So the hormonal acne, the painful or missing periods, the PMS, mood swings, like, irritability, like those are things, even fatigue, like chronic fatigue. Those are things that are the symptom. And so we're told like those are hormonal, which like, yes, but why are your hormones off to begin with? So
Mhm.
we need to look deeper at what's driving those hormone imbalances. So things like mineral deficiencies, gut imbalances, sluggish detox pathways, metabolic issues with your thyroid. Like those are things that are going to move the needle, because I originally tested hormones. I did that for myself when I came off birth control, because that's what I thought was like what you should do based on my
Yeah.
symptoms, right? And it didn't give me any answers. Like my hormones, the levels were like a little bit off, but like to be expected when coming off birth control, but they weren't crazy. And so I was kind of like, well, what do I do? And I did
Yeah.
test hormones in some of my clients, and it gave me more questions than answers. Because again, it's like, well, what's causing the estrogen dominance, causing the low progesterone, like what's causing the high testosterone. And so the labs that I run with my clients are much different than the blood labs that you get run by your doctor. And we're typically not running hormone tests, and for sure not a first resort. Like that's something down the road. Like with my
Yeah.
clients who are perimenopause, or I worked with a woman who she was 37 and she just got married, and she wanted to see if it was a possibility, like if she was in perimenopause or not, like what her progesterone looked like, if she could easily get pregnant, or kind of what that situation was. That's when we might run some hormone testing. But typically I'll do like a hair tissue mineral analysis. That is huge for brain fog, fatigue, low energy. I think any mom or entrepreneur needs to get their mineral levels tested, because minerals literally run the body. And I've seen so many dramatic shifts with women just focusing on mineral support alone, because that impacts your thyroid, it impacts your gut, your adrenals, like there's so much there. And then looking at some other things too, like gut testing to look at what's going on in your gut. For example, tying it back to like estrogen dominance, it's like if you have issues with your gut, you're not detoxifying estrogen. So that could be a reason why you're having like PMS, heavy painful periods, etc., acne, that a hormone test won't tell you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So much amazing information. Like everything you were talking about there, the gut health piece really hits home for me. I've been really trying to hone in a little more on that, because to your point, I think for so long, as you spoke about it, high achieving women, we do tend to kind of look at the tip of the iceberg really quickly and then move on because we need to get stuff done. And so bring just forth a really good point that we do have to dig deeper in, and we can't just look at the tip of the iceberg and just make an assumption off of that. So I think it's like a really good takeaway. Do you feel like, speaking of high achieving, do you feel like your community a lot of times is high achieving women, high performing, that don't want to slow down? And how do you get them to slow down to acknowledge that, yeah, they need to take more time to look deeper?
Yes, I'm like smiling because I'm like that. Like I'm a recovering perfectionist, like type A, like overachiever. And that comes to like bite you in the butt. Like, because then it's like that impacts all your systems as well. Like my labs were some of the worst labs I'd ever seen. I've been my hardest client case so far. And I'm a dietitian. I eat healthy. Do my sauna. Like I exercise. I do all the right things, but you can't outrun stress. And so with some of the testing that I run, so going back to like the hair tissue mineral analysis, it shows you what your nervous system is doing. So it shows you, are you constantly in fight or flight, which I was. And so that, honestly, I'm a very like logical person. I don't feel like I'm stressed. I have a very high tolerance for stress. And so do a lot of my clients. And I'm sure a lot of women listening to this are like the same. It's like, I have a good life. Like I don't have any reason to be stressed, but it's like all these micro stressors that I think we don't recognize that add up over time. And so when I saw the data of like, oh, I'm like in fight or flight and my minerals are tanked and that's leading to my acne and my anxiety, that was a wake up call for me. And that's something like my brain registered. So sometimes having the data with like the specific labs I run can be helpful for women because it shows them like evidence when they're not feeling stressed, that they actually are stressed. And I think that's like step one. It's like acknowledging that. And then just going through and talking about like, where is that stress coming from? I mean, this is a big conversation I do have with my women. And a lot of times I am referring them out to therapists. I have a lot of clients who have decided to invest in therapy support because I can do so much, but I make for sure I stay within my scope. So it's really complements the internal work that we're doing in combination with like getting that external support too, of like working with someone on like the mental health piece as well, and like setting boundaries and doing that deeper nervous system work.
Yeah. We need a team. And I think that is one thing I've learned in my career, trying to manage a business and be an entrepreneur, but also, working full time for a company. I think it's not being so stubborn, and I'm working on it. I think many of us are, but you bring up a good point about just being comfortable with having that team support around you, and you can't do it all because it's too much. It's too much to figure this out all by yourself. And I love that you bring just this, again, niche approach that is then so impactful across the way we show up at work, right? Like the way we focus. Speaking of focus, can you talk a little bit about maybe like an example of whether it was your experience or a past client, but some of the work that you do that can impact some of that focus at work and get people back on track?
Yeah. I have a couple of clients in particular who I'm thinking of. So I'll use them as an example. They're both kind of a similar story. Like they were both two people who they came to me and they had really, really high anxiety. And they just thought that's how they were. Like they would just start crying out of nowhere. But same thing, like they had a good life. They had good partners, like good jobs. Like they didn't have any reason to be stressed, right? But they felt like just they were at this like breaking point all the time. And so we did some functional lab testing. And one big thing I look at when I look at anxiety, PMS, mood swings, things like that is copper levels and their minerals. And their copper levels were like sky high. And copper is an essential mineral. But if we have too much of it or too little of it, if we have too much, it can get stored in the brain. And that can cause anxiety, mood issues, insomnia, brain fog. And you have to go through a very specific protocol that I learned in my functional nutrition training to essentially detox naturally that copper. And so we went through that with them. It's a couple month protocol. And right away, right after like a month, they both started seeing differences. We did that and in combination with like, they were both really depleted in minerals. Their guts were a mess. So that's the power of like having that lab data of like, okay, now we know, like, we're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's like, okay, we know based on your body's data, like this makes sense. Like why I met with one of them yesterday. We've been working together for 6 months and she is like, I'm more resilient to stress now. And so, she's able to handle it because you're never gonna, I think the most frustrating thing, like I'm kind of going off on a tangent with stress, but I'm sure it can relate, is like being told
Yeah.
just you're stressed or like stress less, or like you said, it's a season. But it's like if your body can't handle stress, and fun fact, birth control decreases your stress resiliency. So do depleted minerals, gut imbalances, all these things, then that's an issue. Like those are things within your control. And there are things you can do nutritionally to build up your stress resiliency so that you're not as impacted when there is stressful moments. So I think that's huge.
Yeah. And something you said is really powerful. When we talk about resilience, it isn't innate in us to just be resilient people. You have to build that up. And what you're doing is you're helping women build that back up, and I think for so long we just assume I should just get through this, or I should just know how to work through this, or I'm just going to, again, take one vitamin. And it's like, no, we have to build that back up. What you're doing, I've already learned literally so much as I'm sitting here listening to you. I'm like, okay, copper, this, that, like so many things. Again, women in a professional space, we are so focused on these achievements. But if our core and foundation are off, then we're not going to be able to show up at all. We're going to be struggling along the way. I love this so much. Can you tell us a little bit more just about your community? And I guarantee a lot of people listening to this, like myself, that are trying to sprint ahead in their careers need to just slow down for a moment and get realigned. So tell us about where to find you. What is your community like? How do we get in touch with you? Because I definitely want women to walk away from this with an action item for sure.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm most active on Instagram. So you can find me at Nourished by Tay, and you can feel free to shoot me a DM and just kind of chat through if you are struggling with symptoms or interested in testing, or just want someone to like give a fresh take on these. I see women all the time who like they've worked with a lot of providers, even functional providers, and they haven't felt better or gotten answers. So would love to chat with you. And then I also have a free Breakup with Birth Control masterclass that Britt will put in the show notes. So even if birth control isn't a piece of your story, I think it's still really helpful because it shows my exact process for helping women heal their hormones, whether you're coming off birth control, already off, or again, it's not a piece of your story. And there's real life client case studies in there of like what labs we ran, what we uncovered, what we did about that. So you can see that in real life, because I think testimonials of like real people just like you mean so much more than me just like sitting here telling you like what I do. So that's a free resource as well that I think is really helpful to check out. And then I have my own podcast too, She's in Sync. So I drop new episodes every single Monday. It's on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you're listening to this, it's there as well.
Your wisdom around such an important topic that really impacts the way we show up at work, but also life, and help us thrive is truly essential. And I love your story because we need to talk more about this. Thank you so much for shedding a lot of light and knowledge on hormonal health, but also what's below the surface. I already have that masterclass open on my computer in front of me right now, and definitely will share that out. So thank you so much, Taylor, for being here today in Break Room. And thank you all for listening, and be sure to follow and connect with Taylor for much more wisdom and knowledge around this topic. Thank you.